Good morning and welcome to the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, here in Glasgow. We've been coming to you live with COPTV every day, all day, chatting to leaders, advocates, climate teams about some of the biggest discussions and issues happening here at COP26 and to be put forward throughout these 2 weeks and beyond. Lots of exciting things still to come. Of course, today is all about youth and public empowerment. We've got several speakers coming today to talk about the elevation of the voices of young people and demonstrating the critical role of public empowerment and education for climate action. So an incredibly important day. It's also Ocean Day here at COP26, which is very, very exciting. We've heard already how nature-based solutions are key to the delivery in the race to resilience target of 4 billion people being made resilient by 2030. And we're here to celebrate Oceans Day and to talk about the importance of projects that have been set up, initiatives set up to strive for that. So this morning we're talking to Preeti Sinha, Executive Secretary of UNCDF, UN Capital Development Fund, and Craig Cogut, who's CEO of Pegasus Capital. Hello, good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning, bonjour.
It's great to have you both here. How has your COP26 been?
Extremely exciting, very well run, and lots of initiatives, including this Global Fund for Coral Reefs, which we've been on a couple of panels with, and really happy to be here from that.
Yes, so let's start there. Can you tell us, for those who are watching who may not have heard of the Global Fund for Coral Reef, can you tell us what it is and why it's so important?
Great. Well, I'll kick off from the UN perspective, and then love for Craig to come in on the kind of the modalities and the structure. So there was this initiative within the UN to help support our countries, our member states. We call them SIDS, the Small Island Developing States, particularly, but any country that has sort of coral reefs, and to really protect the oceans and the coral reefs. So we put together some initial funding within the UN, and then we brought on some wonderful partners, both public and private, and we've created a blended fund. So this is a $625 million fund, a blended fund, that's going to now invest in coral reef projects, coral reef preservation. So we are calling it the only reef positive investment vehicle, and we're trying to bridge the coral reef viability funding gap to bring some financial terms into our lovely oceans.
And it has quite a unique model, Craig.
It does, and as Preeti's implying, or not so implying, basically saying we're way underfunded in coral reefs. We're way underfunded generally in the oceans, and the oceans are critical to human life, health, occupations, financial health. They're critical to climate health, and they're critical to biodiversity, and nowhere more so than with coral. And so this fund takes what is a $125 million grant window, which is being administered by Preeti's colleagues at the UN, the UNDP, and involving various other groups at the UN like Preeti, and raising money from private philanthropy, government philanthropy, and which can be applied to make projects viable, figure out where the best science research is, and then take projects to the point where they can be invested in by us. So it's taking a lot of the risk out and maturing projects, and we can now invest in 17 countries. Hopefully it will be a few more, trying to get to 20. And we then will be managing a $500 million sister fund, which is a pure investment fund. We will make money and prove that investors can make money by investing in helping restore coral reefs. And that fund is a classic blended finance model, because the Green Climate Fund, we're proud to say, and they've been amazing partners, have committed $125 million out of the $500 million.
Wow.
To basically, as a junior capital, and then we raise senior capital on top of that, but the senior investors get their money back plus 9% before the Green Climate Fund sees anything. So it's really meant to prove to people the model works. It's very pioneering. It's an incredibly close collaboration too between the grant window led by UNDP and other folks and us at Pegasus.
Yes, and just to add, we have a couple of great philanthropies in there. So Prince Albert II Monaco's foundation, and also the Paul Allen Foundation, just to recognize those wonderful philanthropies.
Yeah, and passionate about this. I mean, and we're also focused here on the most resilient reefs. I mean, then the health of our reefs, we've already lost so many, and viewers who are watching, particularly knowledge about oceans, will know that. But the intention here is to focus on reefs that are resilient, continue to make them, in fact, grow, but learn from them to apply them to less resilient reefs. Because we need, I mean, the funding gap is huge. We need to put tons more into reef restoration.
This focus on small island developing states, kind of how important is that, and how would you like to see that challenge being addressed as areas which are directly impacted, you know, first and foremost by climate change and sea level rise and all these things?
Thanks, Lizzie. Maybe I can take the example of Fiji, one of our member
Yeah.
states, of course. And Fiji is a wonderful example. I think we've oriented around 50 million of capital from the fund towards them. I'd love to talk about 3 projects we're doing already, 3 examples. So again, these have to be investable opportunities. So one's called a Shark Marine Reserve kind of a company. It's actually a PPP project, public-private partnership between the government of Fiji and a diving school called Becca, and they're preserving, the reefs. They're doing things to preserve the reefs around where the diving happens and then get tourism, ecotourism going. So we're going to invest in them. A couple of other examples, we're trying to get it's called a fertile fertilizer company that does non-synthetic fertilizer. Because, you know, fertilizers, when they're chemical, they leach into the ocean eventually and really destroy the reefs. So that's another one on fertilizers, and we're putting, again, a mix of blended funding into it, some grant, but mostly investment money. And then the last one is on the landfill. There's a landfill project where we want to do much more recycling so that, again, that whole landfill mass goes down because that also leaches into the reef. So those were some examples of working with SID. So that's Fiji, and we want to expand that across the Philippines, the Maldives, some countries even in sort of the Belize area as well. Yeah.
And one of our goals is really to replicate. I mean, the problem is scale, and to take a model, take Fiji, small country, but it can apply that what works there. I mean, you need local empowerment, local partners, but there are technology solutions which are so amazing that are available, and the key is to get them working and then apply them and scale and replicate them.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. What lessons have we learned from this fund, and how we can go on to protect other critical ecosystems?
So for me, increasingly the word climate, energy, biodiversity are coming together. While there's decarbonization on one end, the whole net zero emissions, but the fact that preserving our planet is part of that whole climate objective. So I think oceans there, as you know, big absorbers of carbon and protecting ocean life. So for us, this is a key element. There are other things we do in terms of reforestation and so on. And again, what we learned from Fiji, we could take to other countries and see how the government of Fiji has engaged, talk to other governments, see how they can engage and really replicate, and see some models that have worked here, look at other entrepreneurs in other island nations, and make sure we have a vibrant set of companies that the fund can invest in.
And we're seeing, because of the announcement even of launching, companies in place all over the world coming to us with really interesting technologies, some of whom haven't thought of even going to emerging markets or the global south. And where in many ways we become, the fund and our partners locally, the best markets for them. So I think that lesson is, often we too much think of our own locality and we neglect the opportunity to really launch technologies that are so suited for climate mitigation and adaptation in the emerging markets of the global south.
Can you talk more on the partnership between yourselves, both public and from private sectors, and why that's unique and important?
We're delighted. What can I say? And I see Pegasus not only in this fund, but in a couple of others with us, and hopefully a lot more. And really an example. So for us, obviously, we represent donor capital, which we're very happy that countries, give to the UN. And just in terms of UN Capital Development Fund, we have financial instruments as well. So we are that part of the UN that's very financing oriented, wants to deliver. So we try to, come in and structure funds. So we're always in these funds, either trying to help with the whole structure or, identify these companies and help the companies structure. So we can do some of that early sort of development work. And then there's Pegasus, bringing some valuable expertise.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I mean, working and learning and having people help us navigate. The UNDP, UNCDF brings so much. They have resources on the ground, science knowledge, financial knowledge, as with Preeti, and we are really collaborating. And I mean, for me, this was a first too, as purely coming from the private sector. We've worked with NGOs, but working within the UN, there is so much knowledge and so many people dedicated to doing the right things. And you need local partners. And they basically bridge that for us.
Absolutely. Just to add a word, we are mostly present in the United Nations, in each of those 193 countries. We have offices on the ground, colleagues interlogging, with the government. And really, I would add, even UNEP is involved in this.
Yes.
So it's UNDP, UNEP, UNCDF, and of course also a couple of our funds within the UN. There's sort of a joint SDG fund. It's something we do cross-agency funding. And then there's something called the MPTO, Multi-Partner Trust Fund. Just to say, it's a one UN approach.
Yeah.
And we're lovely and very delighted to partner with Pegasus on this.
Yeah. Can you both talk about nature-based solutions, I guess a key pillar in this race to resilience by 2030, and talk about kind of how this fund is hoping to secure the steps that it is over this time?
I'll start. For me, it's a true passion. Before my current role, I was focused on biodiversity financing. So I think the concept of somehow nature-based, nature performance bonds or nature performance funds, all of these things that invest in nature and biodiversity should come to the capital markets. I'd like to see our capital markets look very different and have maybe reef bonds and other structures, right? Like really percolate through our whole ethos of capital markets. That's how I'd like to see it. I'm working on a concept of nature performance bonds, so we'll bring that.
That's good. We're
Watch
going to talk
this
about
space.
that.
Perfect.
So, I mean, we're very excited, and this and some of the other funds Preeti alluded to, nature-based solutions, natural capital. Our partner, another partner in this, and another fund we have is IUCN, who've obviously pioneered nature-based solutions, and these are amazing assets. I mean, if we think about things like seaweed and kelp, the potential, again, for food, health, pharmaceuticals, and carbon capture,
Absolutely.
and ultimately maybe even sequestration, is amazing. And nature provides an answer that in so many ways, and whether it's in the oceans, in the soil, with trees. So it's a passion of ours too. And we need to spend more money on nature.
Could you also talk a little bit more about the resilience then for the communities and the people that are in these environments and places as well, and the importance of this initiative to support them as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, just take the Asia Pacific Islands. You could say there are around 14 major islands where we've got presence. And one aspect is not enough food productions happening there. For example, they import 70% of their food. Reasons being, sometimes they've sold the water rights for fishing to other people. Sometimes the surface is rocky. But, now we don't need soil surfaces for food production. So I would encourage, I'm working with our offices to see how vertical farming or, hydroponic farming can happen. We'd love to get natural food down to people. So food systems becoming a big part of our strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, this is Oceans Day, and we spoke earlier, Craig, about the importance of having a day like this. What would be the key messages you want decision makers to take from today, and actually having an Oceans Day and a bigger presence about our oceans and reefs at COP26? Why is that so significant? Where to start?
It's in some ways, it's strange that we have to ask that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's sad. I mean, the oceans it's the obvious, are so much of our surface. The potential for the oceans for carbon capture and ultimately sequestration, as we're talking about climate, is so immense. If so many technologies are going to be developed on land, many of which could work in the oceans, and we don't focus. Food. The livelihoods that are being lost, but just even on the pure carbon issue. And then when we think about resilience, obviously, coastal communities all being threatened. The oceans are one of our goals with this fund together and with the partners is to get the oceans as an asset class for the financial community focused on. So I bring a financial perspective. We're way underfunded, and it's bad financially, and it's absolutely bad for the planet not to be more focused on the oceans.
Just for those who are watching who perhaps don't know the current status of the reefs around the world, how much is going into protection versus restoration? Are we in a place now where we have little to protect and it's all about restoration?
A lot of reefs have been lost.
Really?
But our hope with this, yes, many reefs have been lost. Many famous reefs were great diving. I went to a reef in the Seychelles, which is in the guidebooks. I mean, it was 4 years old.
Yeah.
I went diving there, and it doesn't exist.
Gosh.
It's a very famous reef. So our hope with this fund in particular is we will keep the reefs that have shown. I mean, we've picked reefs that are resilient. They've been thriving or doing well. Can protect them, grow them, and learn from that, and then apply them to redeveloping and restoring other reefs.
Yeah, no, and I wanted to bring in David Attenborough, one of my heroes.
Yeah.
So the point is, just for the entire sustainability of humanity, the idea is to zero fish stock zones. You know, in terms of as the population increases, we'll have to look at protein. And he's saying, you know, fish are important protein for the future of humanity. And so therefore, we have to even look at oceans and make sure we protect the fishes in there. And so often declare no fish zones till the fishes rejuvenate. And we saw the bit of that rejuvenation during COVID when there was less human activity, that nature came back. So that's another aspect of the ocean preservation.
If we're going to feed what will be a growing population, the oceans are critical too.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've dipped my toe into kelp farming up on the northeast coast of England. It's fascinating.
It's fascinating, and it's so wonderful. And there's research and work being done in Maine.
Yeah.
We just did a little kelp webinar with folks at Southern
great.
California. I could talk for hours about kelp, but there's so much potential in our oceans.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the message to the young people too, empowering, focus on the oceans as well.
Focus on the oceans and focus on kelp. Because kelp
Focus on kelp.
Brilliant. Craig, Preeti, thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you.
today here at COPTV. It's been wonderful to have you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
We'll
having
be
us.
back in just a few moments with further conversations about youth and public empowerment today. We'll see you very soon.